Imagine a person who has always been kind, compassionate, and morally upright, a person who would never hurt another soul, who stands for justice, and who helps others without expecting anything in return. Now, imagine that same person gradually transforming into someone unrecognizable, capable of cruelty, deception, and even destruction. What could cause such a metamorphosis? How does one go from being good to becoming a monster? This is not a mere theoretical question. It is a reflection of the hidden psychological and philosophical forces that shape human nature. The transformation is subtle and insidious, driven by mechanisms that push even the most virtuous among us toward darkness. The final revelation, when understood, has the power to change the way you see human nature forever. At first glance, we tend to believe that goodness is a shield that protects us from corruption. We trust that the best always wins, that integrity and compassion will secure our place in the world. But the truth is far more unsettling. History and modern psychology alike tell us that under certain conditions, anyone, no matter how kind, just, or morally strong, can descend into a realm of behaviors they once despised. The renowned psychologist Philip Zimbardo, whose work on the Stanford prison experiment shocked the world, demonstrated how ordinary people, when placed in specific circumstances, can commit acts of cruelty they never imagined. His research, along with the work of others like Stanley Milgram, shows us that our moral sense is more fragile than we believe. It is constantly at risk of erosion by factors that, over time, subtly change our identity. This slow erosion begins with the small compromises we allow ourselves every day. It starts with minor betrayals of our own principles, justifications for small lies or ethical exceptions that seem harmless at first. You might tell yourself that bending a rule to protect someone or to avoid a conflict is acceptable. Yet each time you cross one moral boundary, the next one becomes easier to step over. This phenomenon, often described as the slippery slope effect, gradually reshapes who you are. What was once unthinkable slowly becomes acceptable until you find that your very nature has been altered. It is not a dramatic change that occurs overnight, but a steady, almost imperceptible descent that ultimately leads to a complete transformation, a turning of the good into the monstrous. Another significant factor in this transformation is the influence of authority and obedience. Think of the chilling experiments conducted by Milgram, where ordinary people were instructed to administer what they believed were painful electric shocks, simply because an authority figure commanded them. Most participants continued to follow orders, even when they were convinced they were causing serious harm, because they felt compelled by duty, pressure, or fear of the consequences of disobedience. In these moments, good people become mere instruments of cruelty, not out of inherent malice, but because they have surrendered their moral judgment to external forces. They convince themselves that they are simply following orders, that they have no choice, and in doing so, they allow their sense of right and wrong to be overridden by the situation. Yet it does not stop with external authority. The power of group identity plays a role as well. When people become deeply attached to a particular group, be it political, religious, social, or ideological, they start to see outsiders as enemies or as fundamentally different from themselves. This dangerous psychological shift, often fueled by dehumanization, permits individuals to justify harming others by considering them unworthy of empathy. History is replete with examples of atrocities committed by people who once considered themselves moral and even righteous, all because they had come to see those outside their group as less than human. This process of dehumanization is one of the most potent tools for transforming good people into monsters. It allows them to dismiss the pain they inflict, as they no longer see their victims as fully human. Perhaps the most unsettling aspect of this transformation is the power of self-justification. When individuals commit acts that contradict their own ethical beliefs, they rarely see themselves as villains. Instead, they construct narratives that allow them to maintain the image of goodness. They tell themselves that they had no choice, that the harm they caused was necessary, or that it served a greater good. This mental gymnastics is the work of cognitive dissonance, a process described by psychologist Leon Festinger, where the mind, confronted with the conflict between one's actions and beliefs, chooses to alter the beliefs rather than change the behavior. In this way, a person can continue to see themselves as moral and righteous, even as they commit acts that are otherwise unthinkable. Rejection of one's own moral compass can become so ingrained that a person begins to see their questionable actions as justified, even noble. This illusion of righteousness further distances them from their original self. The more one believes in their own moral superiority, the easier it becomes to condemn others and harm those who are seen as less virtuous. In time, this self-righteousness can lead to a complete moral blindness, where the individual no longer questions their actions at all. This is where the journey from good to monster becomes most dangerous. It is not marked by a sudden dramatic break, but by a gradual, almost imperceptible shift in self-perception and justification. And yet, for all its dangers, understanding these forces is crucial. Recognizing the subtle erosion of moral boundaries, the influence of obedience and authority, the corrosive effect of group identity, and the deceptive power of self-justification can help us build safeguards against our own potential for darkness. In the next part, we will delve even deeper into the psychology of justification and the illusion of righteousness, and we will explore the environmental factors that further shape our behavior. We will uncover the final, most dangerous step in this descent and reveal the profound responsibility each of us has to remain vigilant against the forces that seek to corrupt our inherent goodness. Imagine that every act of moral compromise you make, every time you allow external pressures to dictate your actions, is like chipping away at a sculpture that once represented your true self. Over time, these small acts of betrayal accumulate until the figure before you is unrecognizable, a once kind soul transformed into something monstrous. This transformation is not a result of a single moment or decision. It is the culmination of countless choices made in the shadow of external influence and internal weakness. And the most terrifying part is that many of us never realize how far we have fallen until it is too late. Consider the environmental forces that shape us. We are not born with a fixed morality. We are molded by the world around us. The cultures we live in, the systems we are part of, and the people we surround ourselves with all have a profound influence on our values and behaviors. In workplaces where unethical practices are tolerated, individuals begin to see dishonesty as normal. In societies that condone discrimination, prejudice becomes justified. When aggression is rewarded over compassion, the capacity for kindness is stifled. These external forces create a context in which even the best of us can be led astray. The power of the environment is such that it can warp our sense of right and wrong, leading us to compromise our values incrementally until we no longer recognize the person we have become. One of the most chilling examples of this dynamic is found in the infamous experiments and real-life events that illustrate how ordinary people can commit extraordinary acts of harm. The infamous Stanford prison experiment and the Milgram studies are stark reminders that under the right conditions, even those with strong moral convictions can become instruments of cruelty. They reveal that the environment, more than any inherent flaw in our character, can push us toward actions that we once thought were unimaginable. And it is this environmental influence that underscores a frightening truth. If we are not vigilant, the very circumstances in which we live can erode our ability to remain good. Yet understanding these forces is only the first step toward prevention. The next and perhaps most critical part of this journey is cultivating self-awareness and moral courage. Recognizing that you are capable of moral compromise is not a sign of weakness, rather it is an invitation to safeguard your integrity. Self-awareness requires constant reflection on your actions and motives. It demands that you ask yourself hard questions. Am I compromising my values for the sake of convenience? Am I justifying harmful actions by convincing myself they serve a greater good? Am I allowing external pressures to dictate who I am? These questions, though uncomfortable, are essential. They force you to confront the possibility that you too might be sliding down a slippery slope toward moral decay if you do not remain vigilant. Equally important is the need to develop empathy. One of the most insidious processes in the transformation from good to monster is dehumanization, the gradual loss of empathy for those outside your group, which makes it easier to justify harm. When you begin to see others as less than human, you pave the way for cruelty and oppression. Cultivating empathy means actively striving to understand the experiences, feelings, and perspectives of others. It is a defense against the dehumanizing tendencies that can take hold in a culture of division and moral compromise. When you nurture empathy, you build a protective barrier that keeps your moral compass aligned, even in the face of overwhelming external pressure. However, even with self-awareness and empathy, the final, most dangerous factor remains: the influence of the environment itself. As much as we can strive to cultivate our inner strength, we must also recognize that we are continuously shaped by the contexts in which we live. The systems, cultures, and institutions around us often reinforce values that conflict with our deepest sense of right and wrong. In such environments, the challenge is not only to resist the pull of these external forces, but to actively reshape them. This requires collective action as much as personal transformation. It means surrounding yourself with individuals who share your commitment to integrity and who challenge the status quo rather than reinforcing it. It means questioning established norms and refusing to accept practices that erode the common good. Only by transforming both our inner worlds and the environments we inhabit can we hope to prevent the slow descent from goodness into monstrosity. In the final analysis, the difference between a good person and a monster is not predetermined by fate. It is determined by the choices we make every single day. It is the cumulative effect of small compromises, the silent surrender to external pressures, and the gradual erosion of our inner moral boundary. It is also a matter of personal responsibility, a call to constantly question ourselves and the systems we are a part of, to fight against the seductive lure of conformity, and to remain ever vigilant against the forces that would corrupt our inherent goodness. If you truly want to safeguard your integrity and remain faithful to your true self, you must recognize that the potential for darkness lies within each of us, but so does the potential for light. The challenge then is not to banish the darkness entirely. It is to understand it, to integrate it, and to use it as a source of strength rather than a vector of destruction. In doing so, you empower yourself to choose a path of conscious, deliberate action, a path where you are the master of your own destiny, where every choice reinforces the essence of who you truly are. And in that conscious choice lies the promise of not only preventing the descent into monstrosity, but of cultivating a life of authentic goodness, tempered by the wisdom of experience and the courage to defy the forces that seek to corrupt us.